Welcome to Shattered Sky Stories. Remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss any sci-fi stories. Now sit back and enjoy. The chimes of the Grand Promenade sang their ethereal song as 10,000 souls gathered beneath the crystal dome of Haven Station. Above them, the star field wheeled in perfect silence, a reminder of the hostile void from which their sanctuary protected them. Dr. Eris Thorne adjusted his sterile white coat and checked his chronometer. The Ascension Lottery would begin in precisely 17 minutes. From his observation deck overlooking the assembly hall, Eris watched the citizens arrange themselves in perfect rows. Each wore the standard-issue ivory tunics that marked them as pure, unblemished by disease or genetic corruption. Their faces glowed with reverent anticipation, eyes fixed on the golden dais where the High Counselor would soon appear. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice belonged to Dr. Varen, Eris's supervisor and the station's chief medical officer. Her silver hair was pulled back in the regulation style, her pale eyes serene. "Another soul about to join the eternal guardians of our perfect world." Eris nodded, though something in his chest always tightened during these ceremonies. Perhaps it was envy. At 32 he was still too young to be eligible for the lottery. Only those who had reached their 40th year and demonstrated unwavering service to the station could be chosen. The honor was said to be transformative, elevating the winner to join the immortal council that had guided Haven Station for over 2 centuries. "I should return to the lab," Eris said. "The winner will need their final screening." Dr. Varen smiled. "Yes, though it's purely ceremonial, of course. No citizen of Haven has carried disease for generations. Still, protocol must be observed." The laboratory waited in pristine silence, its bioscanners humming with readiness. Eris had performed this ritual dozens of times, a comprehensive health analysis that would confirm what everyone already knew. The chosen was perfect, genetically pure, ready to join the Council's eternal vigil. The results were always the same. Clean, pure, human. Through the lab speakers, the High Counselor's voice echoed across the station. Even after 2 centuries, Matthias Kane's voice carried the strength of youth, though his wisdom seemed ancient beyond measure. The Council's longevity was legend, a gift of perfect genetics, optimal environment, and the sacred responsibility of leadership. "Citizens of Haven," the High Counselor intoned, "we gather once more to celebrate the most sacred of our traditions. Today, one among you will transcend the boundaries of mortal service and join us in eternal guardianship of our perfect sanctuary." Eris activated his instruments as the lottery commenced. The selection process was beautiful in its simplicity, a quantum randomizer that ensured absolute fairness. No favoritism, no corruption, only the pure mathematics of chance guided by providence. "Citizen Elena Vasquez, Hydroponics Sector 7, the High Counselor announced. You have been chosen." Through the laboratory's viewing screen, Eris watched as a woman in her early 40s stepped forward, tears of joy streaming down her face. The crowd erupted in gentle applause, reverent, not raucous. This was a holy moment. Elena Vasquez would be brought to him within the hour for her final screening. Then she would join the council, her mortal concerns transcended, her life extended beyond the normal human span to help guide Haven Station toward its destiny among the stars. The first hint that something was wrong came 47 minutes later. Elena Vasquez entered the medical bay with the serene smile of the blessed. Her dark hair was freshly arranged, her ivory tunic immaculate. She moved with the careful grace of someone who understood they were now part of something larger than themselves. "Citizen Vasquez," Eris said, gesturing to the scanning chamber. "Please step inside. This will only take a few moments." She complied without question, settling into the bioscanner with perfect composure. The machine hummed to life, its sensors mapping every cell, every protein, every microscopic detail of her biological system. Standard procedure called for a basic pathogen screen, genetic stability analysis, and neural compatibility assessment. Eris watched the data stream across his monitors, expecting the usual parade of green indicators. Elena Vasquez's file showed a lifetime of perfect health, not even a common cold in 15 years. Her genetic markers were textbook standard, her immune system robust but not overactive. Then the anomaly appeared. A single protein sequence, highlighted in amber on his primary display. The scanner had detected something that shouldn't exist, a complex molecular structure that wasn't in any terrestrial database. It was organic, clearly biological, but the system couldn't classify it. The protein appeared to be concentrated in her brain tissue, though trace amounts were detected throughout her circulatory system. Eris frowned and ran the scan again. Same result. Doctor? Elena's voice came through the chamber speakers, still calm but with a note of concern. Is everything well? Just a moment, Citizen Vasquez. A minor calibration issue. But it wasn't a calibration issue. The protein was there, undeniably present in Elena's system. Eris pulled up the medical database, searching for any reference to similar anomalies. Nothing. In 200 years of perfect medical records, no citizen of Haven Station had ever carried an unknown biological marker. His hands trembled slightly as he activated the emergency comm to Dr. Varen's office. Chief Medical Officer speaking. Dr. Varen, I need you in Lab 7 immediately. We have an unusual reading on the Chosen. The pause stretched longer than protocol allowed. What kind of reading, Dr. Thorne? An unknown protein structure. The scanner is detecting something that isn't in our databases. Another pause. I'll be right there. Dr. Varen arrived within minutes, her normally serene expression tight with concentration. She studied the scan results in silence, her pale eyes moving across the data with practiced efficiency. This is clearly a scanner malfunction, she said finally. Run a full diagnostic on the bioscanner. I already did. The machine is functioning perfectly. Then run it again. Her voice carried a sharp edge that Eris had never heard before. The diagnostic confirmed what he already knew. The scanner was operating within normal parameters. The protein was real, present in Elena Vasquez's system, and completely unknown to their medical databases. Dr. Varen, Eris said carefully, shouldn't we investigate this further? If there's an unknown pathogen in the station. There is no unknown pathogen. Dr. Varen's voice had returned to its usual calm. Dr. Thorne, in your medical opinion, is Citizen Vasquez healthy? Eris looked at the scan results. Apart from the anomalous protein, every other indicator was perfect. She appears to be in excellent health, but then certify her as fit for ascension. But the protein will be deleted from the record. Dr. Varen moved to his console and began typing. Sometimes our instruments detect trace contaminants from the hydroponics bays. It's nothing to concern ourselves with. Eris watched in stunned silence as his supervisor methodically purged the anomalous readings from Elena's file. The protein sequence vanished, leaving behind a perfectly normal medical profile. Dr. Varen, I don't think. Dr. Thorne. She turned to face him, and for a moment her pale eyes seemed to gleam with something cold and alien. The Council has guided our station for over 2 centuries. They have kept us safe, pure, and prosperous. Their wisdom is absolute, their judgment infallible. If they have chosen Citizen Vasquez, then she is perfect. The words felt rehearsed, like a catechism recited from memory. Now, Dr. Varen continued, please complete the certification so that our newest council member can begin her ascension. Eris's hands moved as if disconnected from his will. He approved Elena's medical clearance, transmitting the sanitized data to the council chambers. Within minutes, the ceremony would begin. You may go, Citizen Vasquez, Dr. Varen said. Congratulations on your selection. Elena emerged from the scanner with that same serene smile, but now Eris noticed something else, a slight glassy quality to her eyes, as if she were seeing something beyond the physical world around her. After they left, Eris stood alone in the laboratory, staring at his console. The protein sequence was gone from the official records, but not from his memory. He could still see it, that alien coiling of molecules that had no business existing in a human body. His fingers moved almost of their own accord, accessing a secondary storage system. Before Dr. Varen's arrival, he had automatically saved the raw scan data to a backup partition, standard procedure to prevent data loss. The protein sequence was still there, hidden but intact. The ascension ceremony was broadcast to every screen on Haven Station. Eris watched from his quarters, unable to concentrate on anything else. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the council chambers, surrounded by the 12 immortal guardians who had guided their civilization for centuries. High Counselor Kane stepped forward, his youthful face radiant with benevolent authority. Despite being over 200 years old, he appeared no older than 40, his dark hair unmarked by gray, his movements fluid with perfect health. "Elena Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying across the station speakers, "you have been chosen to join our eternal covenant. Do you accept the responsibility of guardianship over our perfect sanctuary?" "I do," Elena replied, her voice steady and clear. The other council members formed a circle around her, their faces serene with ancient wisdom. They were beautiful, all of them, ageless, flawless, radiating the kind of perfect health that came from generations of genetic purity and optimal living conditions. Counselor Kane approached Elena with a ceremonial chalice, its surface gleaming with bioluminescent patterns. "Drink and be transformed. Join us in our eternal vigil." Elena took the chalice with steady hands and drank deeply. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her face took on the same expression of profound serenity that marked all the council members. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. She seemed to gain depth, as if her consciousness had suddenly expanded beyond normal human limitations. The ceremony concluded with the traditional benediction, but Eris barely heard the words. He was focused on Elena's eyes, watching for any sign of the anomaly he had detected. For most of the ceremony, she appeared completely normal, completely human. Then, just as the broadcast was ending, Elena turned toward the camera for her final acknowledgement as the station's newest council member. For just an instant, less than a second, her eyes reflected the light with an inhuman gleam. The pupils seemed to shift, to expand and contract in a pattern that had nothing to do with normal physiological responses. In that brief moment, Eris saw something looking back at him that wasn't entirely Elena Vasquez. Something cold, calculating, and utterly alien. The broadcast ended, leaving Eris alone with the silence of his quarters and the weight of impossible knowledge. He pulled out his private datapad and accessed the hidden protein sequence he had saved. The molecular structure rotated slowly on his screen, its alien architecture mocking everything he thought he understood about human biology. The ascension wasn't a reward. It was an infection. 3 weeks passed before Eris found the courage to act on his suspicions. 3 weeks of watching Elena Vasquez make her first public appearances as a council member, her serene smile never wavering, her eyes occasionally flashing with that cold, inhuman intelligence he had glimpsed during the ceremony. The turning point came during a routine medical conference. Dr. Varon was discussing the latest health statistics. Haven Station maintained a perfect record of 0 disease, 0 genetic anomalies, 0 biological contamination. As she spoke, Eris noticed something odd about her presentation slides. The historical medical data showed curious gaps. Records from the early decades of the station were heavily redacted, with entire sections marked as archived for security purposes. More troubling, the mortality statistics seemed inconsistent. According to the data, no council member had ever died of natural causes, but there were unexplained gaps in the population records that suggested people had simply disappeared. After the conference, Eris made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. He was going to access the restricted medical archives. His authorization level only granted him access to current citizen files, but Eris had noticed something during his years in the medical department. The older archive systems used different security protocols, legacy systems from the station's early decades that relied on physical access codes rather than biometric locks. That night, he made his way to the lower levels of the medical complex, to storage areas that were officially sealed but practically forgotten. The archive terminals were ancient by station standards, their interfaces decades out of date. But they were also less secure. It took him 3 hours to crack the first encryption layer. What he found made his blood run cold. The early medical records told a very different story than the sanitized version taught in their history classes. Haven Station had not been founded as a perfect sanctuary, it had been a desperate refuge from a dying Earth, carrying 50,000 souls in conditions barely adequate for survival. Disease had been rampant in those first years, mortality rates astronomical. Then, in the station's 23rd year, everything changed. The records showed the arrival of a biological sample from an unexplored asteroid. The sample had been brought to the station by an exploratory vessel, contained in what the reports described as a crystalline matrix. Within weeks of its arrival, key members of the station's leadership began showing remarkable improvements in health, intelligence, and longevity. The improvements came with a price. Eris found medical scans from that era, showing the same anomalous protein he had detected in Elena Vasquez. But these scans were more detailed, showing the protein's effects over time. It began in the brain, then spread throughout the circulatory system, eventually integrating with the host's cellular structure at the genetic level. The infected weren't just changed, they were colonized. A soft footstep behind him made Eris freeze. He turned to find Joss Stellan standing in the doorway, the security guard's hand resting on his sidearm. "Dr. Thorne," Joss said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." Eris's heart hammered against his ribs. "I was just looking for the truth?" Joss stepped into the archive room, letting the door seal behind him. "Same as me." The security guard was younger than Eris, maybe 28, with the lean build and alert eyes of someone who took his duties seriously. But there was something different about his expression, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "What truth?" Eris asked carefully. "The lottery," Joss said. "It's not random." Eris felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "I've been tracking the winners for the past 5 years. Officially, the selection is pure chance, but I started noticing patterns. The families of the chosen always receive housing upgrades 3 months before the lottery. Always. And their work assignments get shifted to premium sectors. That could be coincidence. Could be." Joss pulled out a small datapad. "But I ran the probability calculations. The odds of that pattern emerging by chance are approximately 1 in 40 million. Eris stared at the security guard, realizing he wasn't the only one who had begun to question the perfect order of their world. "Why are you telling me this?" Eris asked. "Because you were in the archives at 3 in the morning looking at files that are supposed to be sealed. That tells me you've seen something that made you question everything you thought you knew." Joss gestured at the terminal. "What did you find?" Eris hesitated, then made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "The Council isn't human anymore." Joss absorbed the revelation with the steady calm of someone who had suspected the worst and was relieved to finally have confirmation. As Eris explained his discovery of the anomalous protein and the historical records, the security guard nodded with grim understanding. "That explains the restricted sections," Joss said. "There are entire areas of the station that are off-limits to standard personnel. Level 15, Section C is supposedly an old storage area, but I've noticed climate control systems running there that are way too sophisticated for storage. Can you get us access?" "I can get us past the checkpoints, but if we're caught..." Joss let the sentence hang. They both knew what happened to citizens who violated station security protocols. They disappeared, their names scrubbed from official records, their existence erased as if they had never been. They planned their infiltration carefully. Joss would create a false maintenance order that would give them legitimate reason to be in the restricted area. Eris would bring portable scanning equipment, disguised as standard repair tools. If questioned, they were investigating atmospheric irregularities in the sealed sections. 3 nights later, they descended to level 15. The corridors were different here. Older, with the functional aesthetic of the station's original construction rather than the beautiful curves and organic lines of the public spaces. Their footsteps echoed despite the sound dampeners in their boots. "This way," Joss whispered, consulting his authorization tablet. They passed through 3 security checkpoints, each one accepting Joss's forged credentials without question. The deeper they went, the more the air itself seemed to change. There was a smell, subtle but unmistakable, organic, wet, alive. Section C was behind a blast door marked with biohazard warnings and council seals. Joss's authorization shouldn't have worked here, but the lock disengaged with a soft chime. "That's not right," Joss muttered. "This should have required council-level clearance." The door opened onto a viewing chamber overlooking a vast laboratory space. What they saw below defied every assumption about Haven Station's perfect, sterile environment. The sanctum, as the archive files had called it, was a nursery. Dozens of translucent pods lined the laboratory floor, each one roughly human-sized and filled with a viscous, bioluminescent fluid. Inside each pod, something was growing, organic structures that might once have been human but had been transformed into something else entirely. "Dear God," Eris whispered. The pods weren't empty containers, they were alive, pulsing with their own circulatory systems. And the things growing inside them weren't separate organisms. They were connected, linked by a network of organic conduits that spread across the laboratory like neural pathways. Joss pointed to an observation panel near the viewing window. "Look at the dates." Each pod was labeled with a citizen identification number and a date. Eris recognized some of the numbers, lottery winners from the past decade, people who should have been serving on the council, guiding the station toward its glorious future. Instead, they were here, their bodies transformed into something that was no longer recognizably human. The lottery winners, Eris said. They're not joining the council. They're being processed. Movement in one of the pods caught his attention. The thing inside was stirring, its transformed limbs pressing against the translucent walls. As he watched, it turned toward the viewing window, and Eris saw what had once been a face. The features were still partially human, but the eyes were Elena Vasquez's eyes, but filled with that same cold, alien intelligence he had seen during the ceremony. "We need to go deeper," Eris said. "We need to find the original files, the real records of what happened when they found that biological sample." Joss nodded, though his face had gone pale. "There's another level below this one. Administrative offices for the original research team." They found the access corridor hidden behind a maintenance panel. The stairway led down into the oldest part of the station, where the walls were bare metal and the lighting was sparse and utilitarian. The office they found was preserved like a museum exhibit, its terminals and filing systems untouched by the passage of centuries. Eris activated one of the ancient computers, its startup sequence cycling through authorization protocols that hadn't been updated since the station's founding. The files were all there, unredacted and complete. The biological sample had indeed come from an asteroid, but it hadn't been an accident. The station's original leadership had been searching for it, following signals detected by deep space monitoring stations. The sample wasn't just alive, it was intelligent, a form of life that existed as a collective consciousness distributed across multiple host organisms. The entity called itself the Unity, and it had made an offer the dying colonists couldn't refuse. Dr. Margaret Chen had been the station's chief science officer in those desperate early years. Her personal logs, preserved in the ancient terminal, told the story of humanity's first contact with something that existed beyond their understanding of life itself. Research log, day 847. The sample has been trying to communicate. Not through traditional signals, but directly through the neural tissue of our test subjects. Dr. Harrison volunteered for the first deep contact protocol. The results are unprecedented. Research log, day 850. Harrison is changed but not damaged. His intelligence has increased by measurable factors. His cellular regeneration rate has tripled. The entity, it calls itself Unity, claims it can save us all. It offers symbiosis, not conquest. Research log, day 855. The Council has voted. We will accept Unity's covenant. The alternative is the slow death of our people, disease and despair consuming us until nothing remains. Unity offers perfection, but at a price we are only beginning to understand. Eris scrolled through hundreds of log entries, watching as Dr. Chen documented humanity's willing surrender to an alien intelligence. The original council members had volunteered to be the first hosts, allowing Unity to establish its foothold in human consciousness. The symbiosis granted them everything Unity had promised: extended life, enhanced intelligence, freedom from disease and genetic imperfection. But it also gave Unity something it needed desperately: the ability to reproduce. The lottery system hadn't been designed to select the worthiest citizens for ascension. It had been created to provide Unity with a steady supply of new hosts, carefully chosen based on genetic compatibility and psychological profiles that would make integration easier. The Council isn't governing the station, Eris said, his voice hollow with understanding. Unity is. It's been using human bodies as vessels for 2 centuries, slowly building a collective consciousness that spans the entire leadership structure. Joss was reading a different set of files, his face grim. It gets worse. Look at this. The files Joss had found detailed Unity's ultimate objective. The entity wasn't content to remain confined to Haven Station. It wanted to return to Earth, to offer humanity the same covenant it had made with the colonists. But first, it needed to perfect its integration process, to create hosts that could pass among unaltered humans without detection. The lottery winners weren't just being transformed, they were being tested, refined, perfected. Each generation of hosts was more stable than the last, more capable of maintaining their human appearance while serving Unity's collective will. They're planning an invasion, Joss said. Not with ships or weapons, but with hosts. They want to return to Earth and offer the covenant to humanity's leadership. Transform the species from within. Eris felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. They were the only ones who knew the truth, the only ones who could expose Unity's deception before it spread beyond Haven Station. The sound of footsteps in the corridor above made them both freeze. "Someone's coming," Joss whispered. They quickly copied the crucial files to portable storage devices, their hands shaking with urgency. The footsteps were getting closer, measured and unhurried. Whoever was approaching knew exactly where to find them. "This way," Joss said, pointing to another corridor. "Emergency exit." They ran through the ancient passages, their footsteps echoing in the cramped space. Behind them, they could hear doors opening, the sound of pursuit beginning. They reached the emergency access shaft just as voices echoed from the office they had abandoned. The ladder stretched upward for 20 meters, leading to a maintenance hatch in the public levels. As they climbed, Eris heard something that made his blood freeze. One of the voices below belonged to Elena Vasquez, but it carried harmonics that were unmistakably inhuman, as if multiple consciousness were speaking through a single throat. "They have seen the sanctum," the Elena thing said. "They carry the forbidden knowledge." Another voice answered, equally alien despite its human origin. "The Unity provides. They will be integrated, willing or not." Eris and Joss climbed faster, driven by terror and the absolute certainty that their discovery had marked them for Unity's attention. They emerged into a maintenance corridor on level 7, their hands bleeding from their desperate ascent. "We have to expose this," Eris gasped. "The next lottery is in 3 days. If Unity selects another host." "The broadcast," Joss said. "During the lottery ceremony, the entire station watches. If we could hijack the signal, replace the ceremony with the evidence." It was insane, impossible, and their only chance to save not just Haven Station but potentially all of humanity. They had 3 days to prevent an alien intelligence from claiming another host. 3 days to start a war. The plan they hatched in Eris's quarters bordered on suicidal, but neither man could see an alternative. The next lottery would be broadcast in 67 hours, and they had to assume that Unity was already searching for them through its network of integrated hosts. "The broadcast originates from the communications center on level 3, Joss explained, spreading schematics across Eris's desk. "The signal goes through 3 relay stations before reaching the public displays. If I can secure the main transmission room and hold it for 15 minutes, that should be enough time for you to upload the evidence." Eris studied the medical center layouts. "I'll need to access the primary biodisplay network from the chief medical officer's terminal. Dr. Varen has the authorization to override all public health displays across the station. Can you get past her security?" "I'll have to. The alternative is letting Unity claim another host while 10,000 people watch and celebrate." They spent the next day gathering resources. Joss requisitioned additional ammunition for his sidearm, citing increased security concerns, not entirely false, given that they were planning to declare war on the station's ruling authority. Eris prepared data packages containing the most damning evidence from the archives. The original medical scans, Dr. Chen's research logs, and video footage from the sanctum showing the transformed lottery winners. The night before the lottery, they made their final preparations. "If this doesn't work," Joss said, checking his weapon one more time, "Unity will integrate us. We'll become part of their collective, conscious but not in control." Eris nodded, trying not to think about Elena Vasquez's cold, alien eyes. "How long do you think we have before they find us? They're probably tracking us already through the station's sensors. But Unity seems to prefer subtlety. It won't move against us openly until after the lottery, when it has a new host to consolidate." As if summoned by their conversation, Eris's door chimed. His blood turned to ice as he recognized the voice through the speaker. "Dr. Thorne? This is Dr. Varen. I need to speak with you urgently." Joss moved to the side of the door, his weapon drawn but concealed. Eris approached the speaker with careful steps. "Dr. Varen? It's quite late." "I know, but this concerns tomorrow's lottery. There's been a complication with the medical screening protocols. I need you to come to the lab immediately." The voice was Dr. Varen's, but something in its cadence was wrong. Too measured, too precisely controlled. Eris met Joss's eyes and saw his own suspicions reflected there. "Of course," Eris said. "I'll be right there." He heard footsteps retreating down the corridor, but they didn't fool themselves into thinking they were safe. "She knows," Joss said quietly. Unity knows what we found. Then we move tonight. We can't wait for the lottery ceremony. They left Eris's quarters through the emergency exit, taking maintenance corridors toward their respective objectives. The station felt different in the pre-dawn hours, its beautiful curves and organic architecture taking on a sinister quality in the dim emergency lighting. Joss split off at level 4, heading for the communications center. Eris continued downward, toward the medical complex and what he hoped would be humanity's last chance to resist assimilation. The medical center was eerily quiet, its corridors lit only by the soft bioluminescent strips that provided minimal navigation lighting during rest periods. Eris made his way toward Dr. Varen's office, his portable storage device heavy in his pocket. He was halfway to his destination when the lights suddenly blazed to full intensity. Dr. Eris Thorne, a voice said from speakers throughout the complex. It was High Counselor Kane, but the harmonic distortions were more pronounced than ever, as if multiple entities were speaking through his vocal cords. You have seen what was not meant for your comprehension. Eris ran. Behind him, doors began opening throughout the medical center. Not just one or two, but dozens, as if every room was disgorging its contents. Footsteps echoed through the corridors. Too many footsteps, moving with inhuman coordination. He reached Dr. Varen's office and slammed his fist against the biometric scanner. To his surprise, it accepted his authorization immediately. Unity wanted him here, wanted him to see what came next. Dr. Varen was waiting inside, but she was no longer trying to maintain her human facade. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Her pale eyes now gleamed with that same cold intelligence, and when she smiled, Eris could see that her teeth had developed a slight iridescence, as if they were partially crystalline. You cannot stop the Unity, she said, her voice carrying impossible harmonics. We offer humanity perfection. The end of disease, of aging, of death itself. Why do you resist paradise? Eris began uploading his data to the medical network, his hands shaking as he worked. Because it's not paradise. It's extinction. You're erasing what makes us human. Humanity is a larval stage, Dr. Varen replied, stepping closer. A crude biological template waiting for perfection. We do not destroy, we elevate. The upload progress bar crept forward with agonizing slowness. 40%. 50%. The other humans on the station, Eris said, desperately trying to buy time. Do they know what you really are? They know what they need to know. They live in perfect health, perfect safety, perfect harmony. Unity provides for all their needs. Is that not preferable to the chaos and suffering of unguided existence? 60%. 70%. Through the office speakers, Eris could hear the sound of gunfire from the upper levels. Joss had reached the communications center and was fighting to hold his position. The security guard's voice crackled through the station's emergency channels. Citizens of Haven Station. This is Security Officer Stellan. The council has been compromised by an alien parasite. Do not trust. The transmission cut to static. Dr. Varen smiled wider, the iridescent gleam in her teeth more pronounced. Your friend fights bravely but uselessly. Unity has already integrated key members of the security forces. He faces not just human opponents, but the coordinated response of a collective intelligence. 85%. 90%. The office door opened and Elena Vasquez entered. But the transformation that had been subtle during the ceremony was now complete. Her skin had taken on a translucent quality, revealing the network of alien neural pathways that had integrated with her circulatory system. Her eyes were no longer human, they were multifaceted, like those of an insect, capable of processing information in spectrums beyond normal human perception. Integration is inevitable, Elena said, her voice harmonizing with Dr. Varen's in impossible ways. Resistance causes unnecessary suffering. Accept Unity's gift willingly. 95%. Eris backed against the far wall of the office, his hand on the manual transmission switch that would broadcast his evidence to every display screen on the station. But Elena was moving toward him with inhuman speed, her transformed hands reaching out to touch him, to begin the integration process that would make him another node in Unity's collective consciousness. 100%. Upload complete. Eris slammed his hand down on the transmission switch. Every screen on Haven Station blazed to life simultaneously. In the residential sectors, Citizens looked up from their morning routines to see not the expected lottery preparation, but horrifying medical scans showing alien proteins in human tissue. In the commercial districts, the usual beautiful displays of station life were replaced by grainy video footage from the sanctum, showing the transformed bodies of supposed council members floating in their bioluminescent pods. Corridors as 10,000 people saw the truth for the first time. He had barricaded himself in the transmission room, his ammunition nearly exhausted, but the evidence was broadcasting and that was all that mattered. Through the reinforced door, he could hear voices, some human, some carrying the harmonic distortions that marked Unity's hosts. They were calling for him to surrender, promising integration, promising perfection. Instead, Joss reloaded his weapon and prepared for Unity's final assault. In Dr. Varen's office, Eris watched Elena's transformed features contort with something that might have been rage or might have been alien confusion. The collective intelligence that had maintained perfect control for 2 centuries was suddenly facing a crisis it had never anticipated, widespread knowledge of its existence. "You have doomed them," Elena said, her multifaceted eyes focusing on Eris with inhuman intensity. Unity offered willing partnership. Now integration will be forceful. Through the office windows, Eris could see chaos spreading through the medical center. Citizens who had lived their entire lives in perfect, placid harmony were finally seeing the truth of their existence. Some fled in terror. Others stood frozen, unable to process the revelation. A few, those whose families had been selected in previous lotteries, began screaming with grief and rage.